Welcome. Back in March, we did an episode with the war stakes on the Russian-Ukraine war. The war was fresh back then, so there were many people who were making the case on why we shouldn't take Ukraine's side. So I debunked what I thought to be the stupidest takes. Since then, there have been some developments in terms of way more stupid arguments and more people doing this, making these claims. For example, we had the development that the Libertarian Party has become the local franchise of the TASS news agency from Moscow to the United States. So we have more myths and stupid arguments to debunk. So without further delay, myth number one is the argument that says that the war in Ukraine is bleeding the US economy. So the argument is, we live in very difficult times. The economy is under strain, very true. And the war in Ukraine is a crazy waste of money and resources. Now, you could make the argument that you don't want the United States to spend a single dollar outside of the country. I'm open to this argument. Even if you make this argument, though, you will realize that there are some occasions where your defense might be stronger with one of your opponents being weakened. But let's not talk about the principle of the topic, because this is not of the essence here. What is of the essence here is how stupid this argument is. So let's break it down. How much money has the United States of America spent in aid towards Ukraine? So they have spent something like 16 billion with a B, 16 billion. Do you also want to go back to 2014? Because again, the narrative says that Zelenskyy is something like a puppet regime for the United States or something like that. It keeps changing. One is that it's a regime full of Nazis. The other is that it's a puppet regime of the United States. You can take whichever version you want. So going back to 2014, since supposedly Ukraine became a puppet regime, the United States have spent 19 billion in direct aid to Ukraine, 19 billion. And most of this noise is about the 16 billion that have been spent since February. Now, the number sounds quite large, but let's think about it into perspective. How much money do the United States spend in aid, in foreign aid, in less geopolitically pressing situations? Think of a number. You think it might be something like, I don't know, 1 billion a year, 2 billion a year? Because if this was the case, then we'd say, look, normally we spend 1 billion, we throw it outside of our borders. This year we spend 16 billion, therefore this is bleeding the economy. Well, only in 2018, the United States paid for aid in 1 year, in foreign aid to various places in the world, almost double the money that they have paid Ukraine in 2022. So in one random year, the United States usually spent something like 30 billion for foreign aid, sometimes more. So no, the aid to Ukraine is not bleeding the economy. Think about it this way. From 2013 to 2018, in these 5 years, including 2 years of President Trump, how much the United States spent abroad for foreign aid? $300 billion. $300 billion. Do you want also to go to check the money that was spent for COVID relief? Not for fighting the pandemic, I mean the stimulus package, not fighting the virus, the virus itself, the cost of the lockdown and all that stuff. We're talking about trillions with a T, trillions, 3 to 5 trillions, depending on how you measure it. And you're telling me that the 16 billion aid to Ukraine is what putting the US economy on its knees? No. What you're telling me is that you don't want the United States to give a single penny to Ukraine because you don't want the US to support Ukraine, because that's your moral compass. But don't tell me that you're worried that the United States is spending too much money on Ukraine. So That's the first myth. Hopefully, we've put it to bed. No, Ukraine is not bleeding the US economy. But you might say, what about the energy costs? What about the fact that Putin is not sending us any more cheap gas and we're going to have a difficult winter? Yes, we will have a difficult winter. But is this because of Ukraine? Or is this because we've been stupid enough to listen, to take our marching orders in our energy policy all these years from the environmentalists so that we end up relying on Putin? And what would be your solution? Tell Putin, yeah, you have a free rein to invade another country just because you have us in your hand when it comes to energy? Do you think that's a clever solution down the road? So no, the war in Ukraine is not bleeding the US economy. And even in Europe, which we're going to be hit really hard, the mistake has been ours. The mistake has been relying on Putin and giving up on cheap, plentiful, reliable energy. Okay, let's see the second argument, which in my opinion is the most dangerous one. The second argument for Putin's useful idiots, but also for some people who don't know better, is that we need to give something to Putin. So Putin cannot go home humiliated, we hear. Therefore, we need to give him something. Now, what will be this something? A part of Ukraine, maybe Donbass, but he needs to get something. He cannot go back with empty hands. I'm listening to this and I'm wondering, have you got any idea what you're talking about? How dangerous this is? You're telling it to an aggressor that the only acceptable way for this war to end is for the aggressor to win something. Would you realize what this means for Greece, for example? I'm Greek. We face unprecedented tensions from Turkey, from Erdogan. So if Erdogan attacks Greece, what's going to be your take? Your take is going to be that after he has shed the blood of thousands of innocents, that he needs to take a couple of islands so that he doesn't lose face going back home. And you think this is a clever take? This is a good solution to the crisis? I really don't get how a serious person can come up with this argument. This is actually the worst possible outcome, because it will tell to every wannabe aggressor, attack and you'll get something. You'll go for the half of the country. Worst case, you'll end up with a quarter of the country. But this is what happens when pragmatism, quote, pragmatism, is the only game in town, when people cannot think in principles. It's not only that they miss the moral argument, they miss the very practical argument, because the moral is the practical. Putin should not take anything, because this would be wrong, both in moral terms, but even equally bad, let's say, in practical terms. Because now the message would be, start a war and you'll get something. Start a war, Erdogan, and you'll get maybe Crete, or worst case, Samos, a small island, relatively, compared to Crete. So no, Putin shouldn't just, quote, win something in Ukraine. And if you support this, I don't know, check your moral compass, first of all, but also check where it will lead. And why is this our problem? Why is this our problem if Putin's going to lose face? Because what? If he loses face, he's going to throw nukes or whatever. We're gonna get to that. But the argument that he just give him something so that he goes back home it's not only wrong, it's very, 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 very dangerous. And again, as a citizen of a country who is facing an aggressor, who is facing someone like Erdogan, it makes me particularly angry. Argument number 3, myth number 3. Ukraine escalated. Ukraine has escalated the war, and now all bets are off. How did Ukraine, quote, escalated? Well, by pushing the Russian army outside of Ukraine, but also allegedly attacking infrastructure, Russian infrastructure in Crimea. Ukraine escalated. Have you got any idea what you're talking about? How can a defender escalate? How can a defender escalate a war? Do you remember how this war started from day one? Attack on Kiev. How can a defender escalate? I mean, there could be a scenario. For example, there's a small border skirmish, small conflict, and then someone nukes the other. Yeah, then you would say, yeah, you can be a defender and escalate. But when someone attacks you with a knife, if we want to put a self-defense scenario, if someone attacks you with a knife, there is no escalation. You do what you have to do. You pull out a knife, you shoot him, you throw a bazooka to him. It's not your mistake what will happen after. You have been attacked. And this, again, is a war of existential status for Ukraine. This is not a war for Donbass or for these regions. Otherwise, the Russian army would have only occupied these regions. So what do you mean Ukraine escalated? They attacked Russian soil with a bridge, they say. So what? If this is indeed the case, so what? Russia has been attacking Ukrainian soil from the 21st of February. So when Ukraine strikes back, it's an escalation. Are you out of your mind? Anyway, argument number 4. We're going quickly through them. My favorite one. If you want World War III, go fight it yourself, I see on Twitter. So there are 2 arguments here. Let's start with the difficult one. The World War III argument. People saying, well, don't push Putin because he's going to pull the button. Don't put Putin to the corner because he's going to, something horrible might happen. Yeah, that's true, by the way. Something horrible might happen. But what is your alternative? This is also relates to myth number 2, which says we need to give Putin something. So your take is what? That when Putin brings up the term nuclear bomb in whatever concept, because he's doing it vaguely, like we have them there and we might use it, then everyone else should fold and say, sure, yes, then whatever you want. Do you realize what the consequences of that would be? Again, forget the moral thing. Your moral compass is broken. Forget about that. That's done. Do you imagine what will be the case if every country, every aggressor now knows that they're one nuclear arsenal away for having their way with their neighbors? What a motive and what an incentive this will be for every country, for every aggressor to get their hands on nuclear bombs. And yet you think this is a clever argument. Right? We have to avoid anything to avoid World War III. Anything to avoid World War III. First of all, what World War III? To go to World War III, there would have to be a series of steps that I don't see them very realistic. So do you think, for example, that China is going to be on board with world annihilation so that Putin saves face in Russia? Do you think that India, or do you think that even the enemies of the United States are going to be excited with this prospect? So the biggest threat of Putin going using nuclear weapons is, of course, for the Ukrainians themselves, because he's not going to throw the missiles to Washington. He's going to throw the missiles to some targets in Ukraine, probably initially military targets, because it doesn't make sense to say, I want to liberate Ukraine, therefore I'm nuking Kiev. But again, what kind of an argument is that? I want to avoid the possibility of a nuclear conflict. Therefore, the moment a thug mentions the possibility of a nuclear conflict, we're going to give him everything. Don't you see how this is the biggest incentive to make nukes now the number 1 tool of diplomacy? Now, then, every time that there is a conflict, someone will say, hey, remember, I have nukes. Give me everything that I want. Now let's go to the second. I mean, there's a whole discussion on the nuclear weapons and how possible it is for them to be used. Now, my opinion on that wouldn't count for much because that's not my expertise. I have some opinion, but that's for a separate discussion. To cut the long story short, I'm not that worried because, again, what's he gonna do? Nuke his supposed brothers in Ukraine? Nuke the front lines with the radiation coming on Russian soldiers? But let's go to the second point, which says, since you're so concerned about the Ukraine war, go fight yourself. What a stupid argument. So for you, your moral compass is so broken. Moral judgment is something which is so alien to you that the only possibility is you go and die, or you stay at home and shut up. You don't say anything. What about moral judgment? What about saying these are the good people, these are the bad people? And by the way, this is my biggest problem with the Libertarian Party. They have no moral. It's not that they say, because I could understand up to a point if they said, look, we have a position, not a single US dollar outside of the borders. But then they would say solidarity to those who defend their country, solidarity to those who are against an aggressor. But these people actually don't do that. These people sell you every piece of Russian propaganda, every piece of Russian propaganda. They call the attack on the bridge a terrorist attack. Okay, so what was today's bombings in Kiev? Retaliation, you will say. What about the bombs in Kiev in the first day of the war? Or in the previous months? The civilian deaths. So their problem is not that they stick to their principles and they say, we don't want to fight for Ukraine, but yay for Ukraine. No, they don't even mention a moral judgment. So it's perfectly fine to say, I don't want to die for Ukraine. I won't go and volunteer for the Ukrainian cause. In my hierarchy of values, it's lower than my goals in life and what I want in life. But this doesn't mean that I'm not going to fervently support them morally. And this is important. Moral sanction, moral judgment is very important. It puts pressure to your government to sanction, to stick to the sanctions to Russia, for example. Or at least it raises your voice to those who are in the trenches of the war or who hide in basements because bombs are falling over their heads, and they say, hey, you're not alone. This is important. But again, to understand that, you need to have something which you are lacking, which is a moral judgment. Okay, let's pause here before we go to the fifth point. So thank you very much, Marilyn. I really appreciate your support. Thank you very much, Phil. Something tells me that giving some treasure to Ukraine now might prove an investment with returns we can't measure at the moment. What say you, Nikos? Phil, if you want to elaborate, you don't need to do it in the terms of a super chat. Just write a comment. So I'm not sure what you mean to prove an investment with returns we can't measure at the moment. If you mean our support, yeah, I agree. I think it's something that was very correct. And again, as a Greek, I sleep way better at night knowing that now Erdogan knows that if I attack another country, there's going to be big consequences. This wasn't the case pre-24th of February. But now every aggressor knows that if I attack another country, there's going to be consequences. I'm going to be an international pariah. My economy is going to tank. Thank you very much for your super chat. If you want to elaborate or reward, even for free, please do so. Marilyn says, no, don't give Putin anything. He should lose all the face he has and then some. Exactly. And this is the only way that this is going to be a lesson that says, don't do such things. Don't attack other nations. Don't be an aggressor. Don't be an imperialist. That's the safest and the most, quote, realist thing that you can do. So the realists will say, let's give him something. You're not worthy of the title. Shruti with a generous, I assume, because I'm not good with calculating how much this is in pounds or euros. Thank you very much, Shruti. This is highly appreciated. And the fifth stupid argument that I hear lately, since last week particularly, is people saying, you know what? I've grown tired of Zelenskyy. I've grown tired of Zelenskyy. This guy is dangerous. This guy wants to lead us to World War III. Or it happens every couple of months, by the way. Last time it was when he did a photo shoot, I think, with the Vogue or one of these magazines. Say, he's a phony leader. He has time for interviews. Again, are you stupid? Seriously. Like, is this the first time in your lives that you see a leader trying to win the battle of sympathy by doing things like interviews? Even the communist guerrillas in the mountains, they did very elaborate operations to manage to get journalists and intellectuals from the West. I think Paul Eliar visited the Greek communist guerrillas in the mountains during the Civil War. Were they phony fighters because they found time to take photos with Paul Eliar under heavy bombardment? So anyway, so people who tell you Zelenskyy did something and now that's enough. I've had enough of him. No, you haven't, because you were against Zelenskyy from day one. You had enough from Zelenskyy from February the 24th because he didn't wave the white flag. Your problems with Zelenskyy started there. They didn't start because he made a photo shoot with Vogue, or the other day he said something which I didn't watch the official translation, but it passed on social media, something like there should be preemptive strikes in Russia. By the way, I agree. This would be a very, very, very bad idea. Very bad idea. Not because it would be morally wrong, but because it would put the world in a danger to do an unprovoked, not in terms of the war in Ukraine. The Ukrainians should definitely have the moral right to do it. But NATO at the moment attacking Russia would be, in my view, a mistake. But that's not your problem with Zelenskyy. That's not your problem with Zelenskyy. In the same way that your problem with Zelenskyy is not that he did the photo shoot for Vogue, in the same way that your problem with Zelenskyy is not that he's harboring Nazis or whatever. Your problem with Zelenskyy changes, by the way, every week. 1 week is that he's sanctioning Nazis, another week is that he's interviewing Vogue, and then it's that he wants to provoke World War III. Another week, your problem is that he's a phony fighter because he has support from the West. As if you were leading a country under attack from Russia, you would be a great and brave leader, even if the West supported you. You're probably that kind of person that you totally have this. You totally be Zelenskyy, living in basements and coordinating a war effort, even with the West supports. Anyway, again, the fact. Actually, don't even change the rationale. Just be open. Get out of the closet. Say, look, we are with Putin. This is who we are. Some of you, particularly in Greece, for decades, you were with Soviet Union. I was like that till in my 20s. So I can understand how you can have a darkness in your soul when it comes to your political moral compass. But be open about it. Don't find every week an excuse. Oh, Zelenskyy said this, and now this is the tipping point. No, there's no tipping point. You hated him anyway. You disliked him from the 24th of February. So be open. Get out of the closet and go be like the Libertarian Party. Be official. Maybe put also a Russian flag in your Twitter bio. Okay. So these are the five myths. One, that US aid is bleeding. The aid to Ukraine is bleeding the US economy. No, it's a drop in the ocean. The second, that we need to give Putin something. No, that would be a disaster. that would be a guarantee that we're going to live in a way, way more dangerous world. Number 3, that Ukraine escalated. No, a defender cannot escalate. 4, that, so you want World War III? No, I definitely don't want World War III. And there's not going to be a World War III based on... and definitely the only way that we can get closer to World War III is if someone, the moment they mention that they have a nuclear arsenal, you fall on your knees and you say, yes, sure, get whatever you want. And the 5th, that I've grown tired of Zelenskyy. No, you were tired of Zelenskyy from day one. So I'm sure that with these people, and again, particularly with the whole political party in the US, having been the Pravda of the 21st century in US soil, soon we're going to have a part 3 of myths regarding the war in Ukraine debunked. Till then, I really appreciate your comments and your support and you spending the time with me. Some announcements. First of all, Friday, there's going to be a talk in London with Yaron Brook and John Watkins. I will be chairing that talk. I don't know if Razi has announced it officially. The talk will be on effective egoism, and it's going to be big. You're going to have John and Yaron. You know this is going to be big. I have chosen the topic because I don't want this to be just another talk. I want this to be a talk where people go there, and when they leave, they're like, something has changed in me. Now I have way more ammunition, either for my own life or how to fight the battle of ideas. So the Friday talk, there's going to be more details soon. It's something which is going to be something you don't want to miss. I don't want to miss it. I don't talk, but I will be there. Then weekend, we have the battle of ideas. Again, Razi, myself, Don, and Yaron will take part in this. Tonight, though, at 9 p.m. UK time, ask Harry anything with Harry Binswager. You can ask any question to perhaps the most prominent, active philosopher these days in the world. And at 9:45 p.m. UK time, Abortion is a Right, a new video with Harry Binswager in the new channel, The Briefly Objective. Go and subscribe to The Briefly Objective. The Briefly Objective is a new channel of the Ayn Rand Center UK, and there you find videos that are shorter. So it's a bit like the Joe Rogan Highlights channel. This is where you find highlights from these events. Talking about short videos and highlights, as I mentioned before, I'm also now on TikTok. Give me a follow there as well if you want. Thank you very much, Richard, with a last minute, very generous super chat. I really appreciate. He says, thanks, Nikos, to you and all there at ARCUK. Carry on. And carry on we will. Thank you very much and see you soon.